He lit the cigar, the flames licking at the end of the paper tube filled with tobacco. John's eyes darted back at the clinic behind him, then at the massive Fury warrior before him. Fury were the thugs of the universe, and that was if you were talking politely. 7 feet tall, half a ton outside of armor, which was never, and a full 2 tons when encased in their ceremonial battle armor. They were positively monstrous. And of course, Senate law stated that their battle armor was purely ceremonial, even though John had yet to see a single piece of ceremonial armor that didn't have monomolecular blades in the forearms, or a suit that lacked high-end electromagnetic shielding, usually purchased by their benefactors or those seeking to pay off their ilk. Their insanely durable physiology only furthered their ability to perform the role of thugs. Physically tough and biologically redundant, the average Fury has a number of organs that are naturally inclined to letting them survive, and even thrive, in the harshest environments. Their eyes are side-set on their bodies, granting them 240-degree vision. Normally a trait in prey animals, this feature has been adapted to let them see oncoming predators from a wide angle of vision. Anatomically, they have a pronounced protrusion along their back, where a human would otherwise have a flat spine, a secondary nervous cluster and reservoir for neuroconductive fluid. Fury possess a thick hide, which are virtually impervious to cuts, scrapes or contusions, with an assortment of redundant organs, such as 4 pairs of lungs, a secondary and tertiary heart, an enlarged hypothalamus, additional adrenal and digestive glands in the parathyroid and endocrine systems. They are highly resistant to environmental hazards, including toxins, radiation, and extreme heat and cold. Even their nervous system is extremely durable, with Fury having the ability to pump internally produced autocoagulating neuroconductive fluid that functions as a replacement for the primary nervous system in the event of spinal damage or serious nerve damage. In addition to redundancy, the Fury are physically tough. Though they have hardened hides, Fury also possess a limited exoskeleton on their bodies. This exoskeleton consists of a slanted, almost hemispherical plate covering the forehead, leading over the top of the head and covering the back of the neck. Though they are mammals, the Fury have an extremely rapid breeding cycle. The average Fury woman is almost constantly in estrus, except when pregnant, which is most always in Fury culture, and this, combined with an extremely short maternity cycle and rapid physical maturation, allows the Fury to rapidly reproduce on an almost phenomenal scale. And if that wasn't enough, with their complex and hardy biology, Fury are able to digest most anything, making the task of feeding these populations simply enough with enough given resources. Rumours of them being cannibals were not exactly rumours, and this particular specimen, Battlemaster Uvenk, had the bones of several different species draped around his neck in a crude necklace. He could identify at least 4 separate human femurs, a Missouri jawbone, and a Khajiit Miat eyeball. John knew all of this because he was a doctor. He was a doctor with a 20mm steel clam manufacturing gauze pistol levelled squarely at his face. The slave-filled pistol was a standard sidearm for the Fury, its magnetised exterior casing engulfing an armour-piercing tungsten core, enough recoil to break a man's wrist and enough power to blow his chest inside out and throw him clean off his feet. It had probably been built by the hands of a slave youth from another race, probably a child. The Fury were also notorious slavers. They'd raid entire colony worlds, slaughtering the defenders. Any who didn't fight, including women and children, were hobbled, crippled, and given neural stapling. Illegal, but, again, the Fury didn't care. Nor did the Gith, or the Confederation, or any other group that used slave labour, or performed testing on slaves. "You know what I want, ape?" the Fury rumbled. John would lower his macro synthesizer, the bracelet quietly humming as the synthesized flames were extinguished, its dull blue holographic display calming. It was a medical edition, rather cutting-edge medical stuff in fact. "Unless you're sick, dying, or in unyielding agony, I'm not forking over 5 crates. Donated adrenaline. I don't care how much your bosses stand to make. People donated it, some dead, some living. Donors that wanted it to go to a good cause, not to some junkie looking to get an edge in a firefight. There was a low whine as the pistol's coils warmed up. John, able to see a few sparks of lightning arc between the coils as it was pressed against his left eye. His heart thumped in his chest. "You want I add you to the dead donor list, human?" the brute asked, the two lanky forms of the Vazgal behind him staring at the human-like vultures, which they were, in a sense, but not in a cannibalistic one. They were addicts to a special chemical cocktail, the sort of cocktail that involved the introduction of adrenaline, available in non-human forms, but their culture valued the concept of taking the cheapest option. With the abundance of humans, that meant that organic adrenaline was their caviar of choice. "No," he replied firmly, moving to keep his hands near his head. John took a puff of the cigar. He could allow himself a bit of unhealthiness. "Just 'cause your kind is weak enough to help others doesn't make it so they'll help you back," he sneered, his almost reptilian features drawing back in a sneer. "Your species may fluff yourselves up, but you're little better than mentally impaired whelps. Our kind eats the ones that are stupid enough to not look after themselves. So why your clinic was doomed from your start," he explained, gesturing at the doorway with his free hand, the pistol still pressed firmly against John's eye. John reached down to the console built into the divider, making a few keystrokes. The doorway slid open with a quiet hiss of chemically diffused air. While multiple races required different atmospheric pressures, the clinic was built to maintain a steady medium. Humans were adaptable to most any kind of inclement weather or conditions, one of their few perks, which allowed them to operate, albeit uncomfortably, in a clinic just like this one. John couldn't help but ruminate on the fact that he just put his entire staff at risk. "Don't get any funny ideas either, bilge licker," the Fury brute stated, gesturing for John to come around with a wave of his pistol. As the doctor did so, he'd feel the press of the pistol's chamber against the back of his head, leading him along. "If you try anything funny, I'll put a bullet in every male, and then shackle whatever women you have here. Maybe even make myself a harem," he remarked with a sadistic chuckle. "That's what you humans call it, right? Harem?" he asked, but John didn't answer. He was more focused on the clinic ahead. Gurneys were laid out in all directions, the small office space having been converted into a medical centre. A high-tech one, admittedly, but still small. Humans were well known across the universe for their prowess in medical technology. That's why they had taken up the role of healers and peacekeepers. Centuries of warfare and brutally maiming one another had given them an introspective on how to heal. Whereas other species focused more on achieving higher body counts, humans had mastered the art of repairing the damage they wrought upon one another. An art since applied to other races. There were an obvious number of gasps and looks of shock as John found himself marched through the clinic, guiding the gunman along. The two Vazgal would raise their plasma rifles, the orange and black weapons giving an ominous hum as the twitchy aliens pointed them around. There were naught more than sickly aliens and attending humans, with the occasional alien doctor of exceptional talent and unique psychology. Most aliens never considered the idea of a doctor, so those that came to John's clinic were prized. They walked past buzzing life support machines, wearing chemical dispensers and more. The Fury stared at them, and more worryingly, the patients. John decided to talk to distract them. It was all he could do. The adrenaline's in the sealed storage alongside the other critical medical supplies, he told the warrior, who had an abrupt glint in his eyes. "We'll be taking those too," he stated, grinning. "Hang on now. These supplies are invaluable. If we don't have them, the next critical patient will have—" Thunk! John felt an abrupt aching in his back of his head as his body hit the deck, his right hand reflexively reaching for it as the cigar dashed itself out against the floor. He slowly moved back upright as the aching subdued itself to a chorus of gasps and cries of alarm. Mostly from the human staff, the aliens all too familiar with what was happening. Going to happen. "They will come to us if they want to live, and they'll pay our prices. Giving away this stuff for free? Fucking disgusting. It was only a matter of time until it got put into good hands," the Fury grunted. John looked at his hand, seeing a good amount of blood. It hadn't broken his skull, but it had certainly given him a good bleeding with the butt of that pistol. John smeared the blood on his hand across his white surgical gown, resuming his walk to the airlock door that led to the sealed storage. "I've heard similar statements before," John told the brute behind him, the Vazgal licking their lips at the scent of his blood. "They weren't cannibals, but they were predators, one with a notable hemoglobin deficiency." "I hear them all the time, in fact," John said, tapping at the console to the right of the door. The stasis field over the door collapsed as the bolts began to slowly retract. He'd hold his macro synthesizer next to it, the device communicating with the console to verify that it was, in fact, him. "I remember one time back on Dryad 4, I was deployed as part of an Operation Peacekeeper task force." His head throbbed, but he went on. 10,000 doctors, 100,000 support personnel, crammed into our half-dozen medical ships with 2 light destroyers for escort. A dozen cargo ships filled with relief supplies. Humanitarian mission, he stated. "We were heading to a Missouri world, back when the Missouri were just starting to expand. Frontier world, barely any running water or electricity." The doorway parted, the man walking inside with little more prompting. He could hear the Vazgal outside, could hear them panting eagerly as they examined everyone inside of the clinic. He knew they wouldn't leave here with just the supplies. Not at this point. Still, he walked ahead to a sealed steel chest, continuing to talk. It was a walk through memory lane. "Your people got there first. Fury Warfleet, Vazgal Raiding Group, standard fare," he commented blandly. "Pillaging, looting, slaver discs sweeping over entire towns, blowing up the planetary defense garrison, slaughtering anyone capable of putting up a fight, enslaving those that didn't or couldn't," he went on, crouching near the sealed container marked "Dangerous. Handle with care." The alien thug paused as he explained this. Something was familiar about this story, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Too many murders and deaths in the galaxies to keep track of one particular story, even when millions of lives were involved. "We had been landside for 2 months by the time your raiders grew tired of the Missouri. Slaving was fully underway, and it was only in our relief camps that the major populations remained. So you started attacking those," John went on, feeling the memories come back. The sights of Fury warriors storming the walls, torturing indiscriminately as their Vazgal allies maimed with the indifference of addicts in an orgasmic haze. He remembered Hania. Dear Hania. The container slowly slid open. "That fight sounds familiar," the gangster stated, his pupils constricting in suspicion. His suspicion would be quickly forgotten as he saw the bounty of precious drugs inside. "Idiots, get in here. Time to loot the place and be done with it," he remarked. John being sent sprawling with a casual shove, crashing against another footlocker. Still he'd go on, his hand slowly slipping into the container as the warrior began looting the first container's contents. Vial after vial, packet after packet, went into the powered armor's pockets. The Vazgal outside snorted and hollered, apparently indifferent to their boss's orders. John heard voices being raised. "We set up our campsites on the far northern poles, well away from the fighting and major centers. We thought you'd leave us alone if we stayed out the areas your kind couldn't inhabit. Humans were durable to almost any environment, Earth having been an excellent teacher in survival in all climates. But your kind didn't care. They never do," he bemoaned, grunting slightly as he rose to his feet. His left hand slipped into his coat pocket for his hypospray. "But for all our kindness," he stated, slowly standing taller and taller. He felt his pulse quicken. "We have a long, intimate history with war," he remarked. "We knew the signs. We knew you wouldn't relent. We discussed it time and time again on the internet, the extranet now. The fact that you'll never give up," he remarked, his left and right hands joining together. The vials he picked up fit into the hypospray with a quiet hiss. It was a gesture similar to loading a pistol, but his was an instrument of healing. Terabytes of conversation, discussion, reasonings, trying to find a way to dissuade you, to make a peaceful solution so we could work in peace and coexist. The Fury stood up as he looked at John. "I don't like your tone, human," he remarked, the last of the adrenaline packed away. His eyes showed nothing but disdain as he began to grip his pistol tighter, beginning to raise it. "I think I'll be taking some of your people with me," he remarked at last. "I'm putting a bullet in that fucking running mouth of your—" John was quicker though. His left hand reached for the pistol as he ducked low, the massive Fury warrior much slower thanks to his impressive weight and scale. A hyperspray in his right gave a quiet hum as he brought it along, pressing it right into the warrior's forehead plate. The device gave a quiet click before depositing his payload. The doctor rolled away like a cat, his eyes staring with a much more feral look to them. The look of an ancient predator, even as the Fury roared, bringing his pistol around. "But we knew we couldn't," he finished, staring once more down the barrel of the pistol. "So we didn't just send doctors, we sent corpsmen," he growled. "Not just operations specialists, but operators," he remarked. "Not just support personnel." The massive, power-armored brute stood perfectly still. John could see his eyes dilate as anger gave way to surprise. His index finger was twitching around the trigger of the pistol, but it couldn't get enough tension to pull the actual trigger. "But peacekeepers, that was a vasoconstrictor I just filled you with," he remarked. "And not a small dose, either." His voice was quiet as he put a second vial into the device. "Your anatomy is unique. You have multiple hearts, so you have a naturally high blood pressure. Lots of blood flowing very fast, even for a big body like yours," he stated, watching a few droplets of blood begin to leak from the alien's eyes, the corners of its eyes dotted with red flecks. "Right now you're going tachycardic," the doctor stated. "Your hearts, the organs that move your body's stem cells, move so quickly to even the tiniest injury, beating at quadruple their normal rate to try and get the minimal amount of blood necessary to move." He reached for the massive pistol, the 20-pound weapon slipping out of the alien's limp grip with a firm tug. "Even now, major arteries are rupturing in your head and in your torso. You'll hemorrhage once the vasoconstrictors get pumped into your brain." He dropped the gun on the ground, slowly walking over to a storage bin, retrieving a plasma scalpel. "You won't die. Not like the ones I fought before. We brought law to that world," he remarked, tapping the base of the pen-like object. A monomolecular blade of plasma came to life. "We brought peace and healing. We healed through violence, just enough to pacify both sides. A surgical amount of violence," he mused, walking towards the doorway as he looked back to the warrior. The Vazgel in the clinic were getting louder. They were likely trying to corner one of the women nurses, rape them as a show of dominance and for a biochemical rush, even though interspecies reproduction was impossible. "You won't die. I swore an oath not to kill after that day. We may be weakling rodents, but we have standards. Standards will spread by any means necessary," he stated mildly, tapping the control console on his way out. "You will, however, become a vegetable. I'll have the nurses process you after I'm done lobotomizing your peers." The doors sealed shut, and the stasis field arose in his wake. It was time to heal once more.